Welcome to this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. You know, every summer about this time, we spend a little time talking mosquitoes, and it's that time again. So we're going to be spending some time with the Suffolk Mosquito Control Division talking about what's going on out there in the city of Suffolk and also what's to come. Stay tuned. Welcome back to On the Scene. We're joined now by a familiar face, if you watch the Suffolk Municipal Channel, Charles Abbott. He's the Mosquito Control Superintendent with the City of Suffolk Public Works Department, Mosquito Control Division. And we've had Charles on pretty much every year to talk about mosquito season and what's going on this year, 2020. A little different start, certainly. And let's get into that off the top. Charles, thank you again for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
And your wisdom. So when we talk about how things are looking now, and of course we're taping this mid-June 2020, the weather's been a little different.
Yes, very different.
And how has that impacted what y'all are seeing out in the field and with all your research?
It's definitely one of the lowest years we've had so far. So since we started trapping and keeping an eye on the population, we thought there was going to be a huge spike because we saw some really large numbers in the beginning of the season.
Right.
When we started trapping. But as the season has continued to go forward, we've had some interesting weather. It's been wet. It's been hot at some points in time, but it's really not ideal. Water has been kind of flowing through. There hasn't been a lot of chance for it to stagnate and get really super hot. So populations have kind of declined, and we are seeing one of our lowest years in quite some time. Yeah, so we're trapping.
Right.
Now we're doing our testing. We are in the swing of things, just that populations and they're not passing our thresholds that we normally have set for us to do all types of different applications.
Right.
Now, where we do see large populations, we're taking care of those. More of a concerted effort to be in a concentrated and local area instead of doing a lot more of the general widespread sprays, because those seem to be working really quickly, knocking down numbers and complaint calls. So.
Now I know when people this time of year, it's raining, mosquitoes going to be out, but again, because the water's moving and we've had so much of it in that sense, it's that stagnant, like you said, the water that's still, that's where you have more of an issue with mosquito growth, correct?
And cold. It's been
that's true. Right,
cold.
Right.
I mean, right now it's mid-June. It's 60 degrees out there. That's, to me, pretty odd. I mean, we should be in some sort of warming session where we're going in July and it's getting hot, you know? But that's not what we're seeing. You know?
And what type of temperatures usually do you need for a sustained period of time to see that mosquito growth?
I mean, I would think, I feel like the mosquitoes they're more active when it's humid. So when the sun's out and it's wet and humidity, 70s, even in the 70s, 80s, mid 80s, you're getting some humid temperatures there.
Right.
And you're seeing some water evaporation, so that creates humidity. And then the rain that's going to be in artificial containers like tires that people have, or pots that are out in the yard, and they're getting some kind of, heat. That water is ideal for mosquitoes, right?
Now, are we unique in Hampton Roads, or what? Obviously, you guys work together. You network with the other folks who handle mosquito control in other cities.
Yeah.
But is it pretty much what we're seeing right now? What you've described? What everybody else is seeing?
Not necessarily. We have half the Great Dismal Swamp, so we share that with Chesapeake and parts of North Carolina. Because we have that swamp, we have a lot of rural species, and a lot of mosquitoes are coming from that area. So where our city and where our more urban developed areas are at, we're seeing that's where our concentrated specific mosquitoes that take care of. They are breeding in those habitats more often. That's where they're focused on. So we do have a delineation between kind of city mosquitoes and country mosquitoes, which is cool to see.
Right.
But where those lines blend, that's where you get a mixture of both.
Got it. So when we talk about, I know the numbers haven't really been there, but you talk about the spot application, the things that y'all been doing. So let's say someone says, look, I've got a mosquito problem at my property or whatever. What should they do when they say this is the problem? Because obviously y'all were out there in the community seeing on things, but you can't hit every little spot.
Correct.
So what should someone do? Resident of Suffolk, they got a problem. Pick up the phone and call? Is that first step?
I would. I think a lot of our citizens don't even know still that we exist, and so we need to do a little bit better job of putting our information out there. You can call us. You can put a service request in on the website, and those are two specific ways. You can just call us and say, "Hey, I got a problem." Most of the time, what we'll do is we'll have a service request, and I'll send technicians out to that particular property to see what's going on and see how we can help them. Most of the time, we don't do particularly specific applications on a person's private property. There are extenuating circumstances. So when we send a technician out and they see something that's pretty high, and then it may be a public health problem, those are those exceptions. But most of the time, there can be quick fixes with a service request and a home inspection, because the technician can go in there and identify breeding sites, we do some education with the particular citizen and the homeowner, do some tipping and tossing, and if there are some areas that we necessarily can't fill in with dirt or tip and toss, we'll do some small larval applications, but not a full-out spray.
I understand. But when you talk about tip and toss, I know it's a very simple phrase.
Oh, yeah.
For those who are thinking, okay, what exactly is he referring to? What exactly are you referring to?
Anything that's holding water. We call them artificial containers, buckets, pots, pans outside. Anything that's holding water, tarps. Just clear the water out, dump and tip over buckets and pots and pans and wheelbarrows that may be outside. And then tarps just clean up often. So you might have some, kiddie pools out there that you might want to get turned over, and then, those particular areas. Now, like larger pools, above ground pools and even in ground pools that may not be in service. Hey, it's a good idea if you might not be putting it in service this year to maybe give us a call. We could see something in there and maybe put some larvicide in there. Yeah.
Now, another tool in the arsenal that certainly the residents can do are the mosquito dunks.
Yes.
And we've talked about that before. Now, certainly with the COVID experience that we're all dealing with, it is with city sites, facilities not being open to the public at this stage, not all of them anyway. So distribution's been a little bit different because of that, but as more sites come online, as hopefully things keep progressing in a positive direction, then we can have more of those locations for that. But right now, correct me if I'm wrong, it's Fire Station 6, which is on Kings Fork Road. And the two recreation centers, which just recently reopened to the public, and that's East Suffolk and the Weatherville Recreation Center. You can pick them up there.
Yes.
Now let's talk about the procedure to pick them up. What do you need to come with? What do you get?
Of course, it's during those business hours that those areas are open. So places are opening up. So at this point in time, I think Fire Station 6, there's a sign on the door and tells you specific directions to call front desk, and they will help you get your dunks.
Got it.
You still always have to have some type of proof of residency, your identification, and you're going to have to sign something. And that's really pretty much it.
Okay. So you get the dunks, and I know we've talked about this before. You don't hang them in the yard.
Nope.
You don't just chuck them somewhere in the yard. There's sort of an approach to it.
Correct.
And a proper placement so that you get the impact that you want to have for them. What would that proper placement be in most situations?
They just have to be placed in water.
Water, okay.
The water activates the particular bacteria in that mosquito dunk, and then the mosquitoes will feed on that bacteria, and that's how they die.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple.
Very good.
It's just that there's a misconception that it emanates a adult mosquito repellent, or the mosquitoes will smell it and they'll die. It really needs to be something that the juvenile mosquitoes feed on.
So there's not. So what you're saying is inside each dunk, when it gets wet, there's not a little mosquito control truck that pops up and starts spraying on the perimeter
No,
or anything like that.
Not at all.
If it did, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah,
You patent that. You can give me my cut later.
Yeah, there's not some mist that comes out. It really needs to be within the water.
Got it. And how many dunks can people get? It's once a month, correct?
It's once a month, and each dunk treats about 100 square feet.
Got it.
So you have about 200 square feet there, and then a lot of people have extenuating circumstances because there is rural areas, there are city areas. People have ornamental ponds, and sometimes those ponds or those ditches are larger. So that's when we encourage to do a service request, because it might not always be the correct application to put a mosquito dunk down. And if we go into a home inspection and that person really just wants dunks, we might be able to say, hey, we can treat your 500 square feet with what we would usually treat a ditch with, right? It wouldn't be particularly dunks, but could be something more powerful. Could be something that could last longer, so it would have a residual effect. And instead of lasting, maybe a week, it could last 2.
Got it. Well, you've talked about the folks that go out in the field and do some of the work for you. What type of staff do you have in the sense of the different things that they're doing? People might say, well, I don't see a truck driving down my road spraying. We already kind of talked a little bit about that because of what's going on right now. But there are still people that are hard at work each day doing a lot of different things that people don't necessarily see.
Absolutely. Right? I have a whole biology section. So they're out there putting traps out every night and then picking up in the morning and identifying all those mosquitoes, the species, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Not every mosquito transmits a disease, so we really focus on the ones that do transmit disease so that we can focus on cutting the transmission of those diseases that are in the population. So we really rely a lot on our biology in order to focus our attention so that we're using all our resources in a more efficient way. So our biologists are doing that for us, analyzing data, relaying that to me and the technicians, and then we dish out where we're going to do all the work, applying pesticides and focusing in a certain area because we could see that particular environment is now becoming an ideal place for a particular mosquito.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and then that's when our technicians go out. Treats, they have their particular zones, they're driving their zones, checking different sources that are normally breeding, and applications.
So pretty much everybody knows, their perimeter, their zone, like you said, the areas maybe that have traditionally been hot spots, so they kind of know where to look, but also know that, wait a minute, we're starting to see this over here, so again, that's why the trapping is going to indicate kind of what you're dealing with, what the conditions are out in the field, so to speak, right?
Yeah, that's exactly that. We work as a team. Yeah. One area gives us information, we take that information and dish out all the other operations that need to come from it.
Prediction hat for you, rest of mosquito season. I know the weather's going to dictate a lot of that. I know certainly you tend to follow that and see kind of maybe what's coming, so you get an idea maybe what's. But again, with these temperatures that have been kind of up and down,
it really depends on the temperature.
It's really kind of been real weird, a little odd.
If July gets a little warmer, and August tends to be the hottest month of the year, so if July ends up warming up, we could see a spike during that time, but I think overall we're probably going to be low for the year, because of what we're seeing now. Right. And I don't know, it's just too cool. Right now it's just so cold.
So I guess it's cool that it's cool, right?
It's cool, then the populations are dying down.
Now, but with mosquitoes, it isn't a situation where they're just dormant and they're just waiting to go to work. It's really got to be a situational thing that's causing that growth and that population to expand. Yeah. It's not like they're just hiding behind a curtain and then as soon as the temperatures go up, they're going to pop out of nowhere. Those situations still have to be right, and that's when you see that, right?
Yeah, most of the time the mosquitoes, they're not in an adult form and waiting behind a veil. Right. What they're doing is they're taking advantage of it, and a mosquito's lifespan as an adult is not very long. So and it just depends on each species. But a lot of the times, the eggs are really waiting to hatch out. So areas could be flooded, and then they have a whole bunch of eggs, and then the right conditions, if it's warm enough, they pop out, and then they start doing what they do to become adults, So really, it's more about the eggs and the larvae. Then the larvae can stay in a particular environment for a while, as if it's stagnant and that pool stays around. If it doesn't evaporate fully, then they could be in there, or they don't get eaten by predators. So, each cycle, each life stage can be important to the adult to becoming an adult mosquito. When winter comes around, that's when our adult mosquitoes will just find a corner somewhere, and then they will be there until the spring.
Got it.
But this is not that time. But I mean, we're kind of exhibiting some cooler temperatures, so that could be happening too.
Got it.
You know, catch basins are notorious for having mosquitoes stay in it. So you can lift up a catch basin or a drop inlet, and you can find that mosquitoes will be coming up.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we've seen that a lot in other cities. So it doesn't mean that it can't happen in Suffolk, but you know, we're always just there to see what's going to happen.
Got it.
You know.
So again, we talked about the mosquito dunks that are available right now, and certainly they'll be available in a wider form again when other city facilities come online.
Absolutely.
So we'll be looking forward to that. Certainly, if someone has or thinks they have a mosquito problem at their particular, give us a call, and then you guys will send a technician out to evaluate the circumstances. Again, it's not just simply a mass spraying that necessarily, it may be some simple fixes, as you said.
Absolutely.
And people can also do that with an online service request. And also online, correct me if I'm wrong, if people want to know where mosquito spraying, whenever it really gets ramped up, is happening, they can also see that on a map.
They
because
can.
you also do track that way.
Right. Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of work on the website to make it a little bit more friendly.
Yeah.
So we're updating that, and yeah, you can find out where you've been sprayed, when it's been sprayed within the past week.
Right.
We don't keep a lot of the information historically, so. It's in our it's in our database, but it's not being put out on the website that often. So you can tell whenever a week passed from where you're at.
Gotcha.
And mosquito dunks, you know, spraying, and you can request service there too.
And of course, tip and toss, which is always a good thing to think about. And that really, you can do that just by evaluating your own property.
Absolutely.
I know the technician, whoever he or she may be, will certainly evaluate that for the homeowner. If they're out there or business owner as on the site, and they see things that are like, look, this is probably where your sort of maybe your problem area may be rooted in. So that's a good thing to do. Well, Charles, thank you again for your time.
No problem.
And thank you and your staff for everything you do.
Sure.
I know, as we said, it's been a quiet season so far, but there's July and August ahead, so you never know, and it could reach into September, October, depending upon conditions. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that. But again, thank you for being there before, during, and after we need you. So in that sense, for doing the work that you guys do.
Yeah, and I guess all the updates are going to come on Facebook, social media, all the media outlets. So I guess have the citizens make sure y'all are looking forward to that.
Okay, very good. Charles, thanks again.
All right, no problem.
Appreciate that.
All right.
That would do it for this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We'll see you next time.